All right, Hollis, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So when we get started, let's get started and let's talk about your background, how you got started in the publishing and marketing business in the first place, so we can get to know a little bit about you, and then tell us about your business.
Sure. So internet marketing was kind of an accident that happened. Really, I was in college and was just finishing, and Facebook had just come out, and it was like literally changed my experience. We were one of those first colleges to get like invited to be private members where everyone was exclusive, and really you connected people in your classes. And I got to stop going to class because I could just find the kids in my class, get the notes. And I was like, man, this is some revolutionary stuff here. This is gonna be big. And then I see relationships getting broken up because of pictures and stuff. I was like, man, this is gonna change our world. So then me and my roommate, we actually saved up a little money and hired some guys in India to build us kind of a clone of what it was at that time. So we wanted our own social networking site, and we were just going to pick a different market where they were going for colleges. We actually drove around and sold it to K through 12 schools, like Montessori academies and places like that. And it was an opportunity for the parents, the teachers, the students, and all of them to kind of be connected in one area. And did that. It was good, but it was very time intensive, meeting with the schools and selling this thing. So then we had the idea of essentially flipping this into a business opportunity, and we knew another internet marketing guy who kind of helped us figure everything out, how to set up an affiliate program and an email list, and I recorded a 30-minute presentation, which was a video sales letter before those even really existed as a norm in the marketplace. And it was just an earlier time. I guess this was 2006, and we ended up having a really successful first launch without trying. We had a $500 offer plus $20 a month, and we kind of just hit the market at the right time. And in our first 2 months, we did like 1.2 million in sales, and then the first year, about a little over 2 million. And that was really cool. Now, we didn't keep a lot of it because we were young, dumb kids who didn't set up our business right and paid a lot of taxes and just spent money. And it was really interesting, but it was the first glimpse of what this can look like. Then, kind of fast forward, I moved to Colorado. We kept running our software as a service company. We grew a bunch of different other products similar to that, and it was really cool. But then I kind of lost my steam for it. I kind of got the internet market. Once I get something really like, well, I need to go somewhere where it's a little more exploratory and I'm learning more. I kind of got bored with it, and started getting into the space of working with authors, because I became obsessed with reading again because I was just trying to learn new stuff. And instead of paying for workshops these guys are putting on, I wanted to figure out how I could be someone of value to the authors that I wanted to meet and hang out with and learn from. And so I started working on publishing stuff and marketing from that, from everything from like kind of how they build their blog following to get a bigger book proposal, or how Kindle can be used to generate leads. So I kind of combined what I learned from lead generation and sales funnels and email marketing and internet marketing, and I was like, just used Amazon as a new resource for that. And so that was like my focus for like 2 years, and still is up and running with quite a few titles. And people we're partnered with, were basically, I look, I'm like, if I have a client who's got really good content and they're out there buying traffic from Facebook or from Google, or they're running their blog and they have these other traffic sources, generally they are denying one of the best traffic sources out there, which is Amazon, because it is a little harder to compete because you're not running advertisements, you're putting products up. So the only difference is, instead of having an ad running on Facebook, I'm now selling a product at a low price point to get them in the entry level area, and then start to engage and build a relationship. And it's funny, the idea came to me when I looked at the amount of books I had read in these 3 months, that I just went down a reading rabbit hole trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself. I'm like, I'd really like if all these guys that I donated hours of my life to and got to learn from and have an experience with would keep communicating with me. I know they can, and they don't like make it easy. So it was a very simple concept that grew into something that I started perfecting and learning more and more about, and continue to. And so now I'm doing it with some very, things all over. From we've got a book that's getting turned into a Hollywood movie franchise, and we're doing the same model with it. We've got health and fitness books that we're building lists of, marketing other affiliate products and things like that on the back end. So it's a pretty simple concept, but if you really dial into it and do it the right way, and start to perfect little pieces of it, it's a pretty cool thing to look at.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you just made a brilliant point there that, like you read tons of books, and I read all the time too, like several books a week, and a lot of nonfiction stuff. And it's like the authors don't make it easy, like especially with paperbacks, they don't make it easy to stay in touch with them, to learn more from them, to study more from them. And like most nonfiction books at the end, if they have anything that talks about their products or services that they promote, it looks like these cheap old cheesy sales letters from the 80s with like a little white and black graphic, and it's like get the whole publishing thing for 9.97 or whatever, but they don't offer you a free report, or they very rarely even link to their blog or anything like that in their books.
Yeah,
So I think that you're right, that there's a big opportunity a lot of authors are missing by not sharing more information with their readers.
exactly, and that's what I think, more than going straight for the jugular and trying to make a sale and make it part of your funnel. This is a relationship tool. Like, if I sat down and had coffee with someone that we were prospectively going to do some business with, I'm going to follow up on things I learned, and it's a slower cycle. And I think we're actually moving into an era where you have to move your free line. You have to build a quality relationship with someone before you're going to get the transaction. You're starting with an actual monetary transaction, which is cool, which might be a 99-cent or $3 Kindle book, or even, we do the exact same model with the paperback books too. But you have to basically keep that relationship going. Like I spent this weekend, I read 3 books by Sam Harris, and now I am on his blog, and I am listening to his podcast, and I just kind of grew a relationship with this person without ever having to have one-on-one communication. We did a good job of having lots of really good stuff out there, and it wasn't even obvious that it was systematized. It could have been improved. I had to go work at it. And I think just making it simple and easy for people to do that, they're growing a relationship. A book should be a tool for that and that alone if you have another business going on. Now with the nonfiction, the fiction, it's a little different. Nonfiction is very cut and dry. But you made one point that I learned can get a little bit of an uprising, is like you never want to give away a free report, actually. What you would want to do is do a video or something multimedia. For some reason, and it's fairly logical, readers don't like having to go opt in for another piece of text. So that could have been delivered in a book or free on their Kindle Reader or whatever, or linked on their blog. But if you make a logical reason why you need them to opt in, so like for instance, one of our health books that did really well, she offered, I think, something like 20 recipes in that book. And we had her shoot like awesome videos in the kitchen cooking, like the top 10 recipes in there. I'm like, hey, go put your email in, and we'll give you these 10 awesome recipes and also send you some other great goodies. And that worked really well. I think we actually had, it was like a 36% opt-in rate of people who bought the book and then got on the email list. And if you think of the quality of the people on an email list like that compared to the quality of someone who just opted in for a free report from finding your website, it's really high. So, from a business perspective, your conversions are higher. And from a relationship perspective, you've already had a conversation with that person that they probably read, they spent a few hours reading your book and having a conversation with you, and now we've engaged it at a deeper level. And people want to have stories, they want to be entertained, they want to have a relationship, they want to have connection, and we have an amazing tool and time period right now to actually do that. No author has ever had this option to do this before. It's really not that hard. It just takes starting to work at it and look and make sure that your lens or your frame that you're looking at it is, what outcome you want. Like some people's outcome might only be to build a passionate relationship with their readers because they're releasing more books. Some people's frame or lens might be that they have a lot of other products that they want to sell to them, so they need to do that in a very special way to, really hold that relationship in high regard. Some people might be doing other things. There's a lot of different reasons, but I think one of the key ways to do it the right way is define what you actually want to do with your reader after they're done reading the book. And as soon as you know that, I think it makes a lot of sense for how you attack tactically or strategically how you would implement that into your program.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great point. That you want to have the end in mind, right? So you want to understand like where you're going. Like, what's the whole point? After someone reads your book, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to be on your email list? Do you want them to go to your blog? Do you want them to go to your podcast show? Like, what is the next step for them? And because like especially for authors, I know like we're so busy, like we don't have time to do everything, right? So it's like you don't want to just go start a blog and start a podcast show and start everything, if there's no point, like there's no purpose to it. But if you understand, like, this is what it's going to do for my business, it's going to help me sell more books, or it's going to help me sell my coaching program, then you understand, have a clearer vision of what you can actually do in your business and what the important next steps are.
Yeah, exactly, and I think it's the same way when you actually go to write and launch a book. Not just how you're going to build the list, but is no one really makes real money from just book sales. If you have a serialization of books, and you have many more that come out after it, where you've got back-end products and services and events and other things that are sold from that relationship you build. But I like to kind of go down the list and say, well, here's all the things that can come from having a really successful, book out in the marketplace. And what is it that I'm really going for? Is it that I want to call myself a best-selling author, so I have that calling card? Is it that I want to get my book in the hands of as many people because I got a story to tell and I'm passionate and it must be out there in that way? Do I want to get more publicity? Do I want to use this to generate leads? Do I want to use this because I need it so I have something in the back of the room to sell because I speak all the time? Maybe I want to raise my speaking fees and be in the best selling. Like, the amount of options I could list off is pretty much infinite, and that's why books are really cool. They are something that can be whatever you want it to be. And once again, we are in a time right now it's never been before where you aren't dependent on publishers and trucks and traditional distribution channels and all of that. You have the ability to take it whatever angle you want, and I think that kind of raises the first big question: is if trying to get a traditional publishing deal or doing a self-publishing, concept for this. So, which one of those is the best for you? Because they're both very, very different, and I think it just really depends on what you want, how you decide your approach to how you're going to do all that.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, so let's talk about some of the nitty-gritty details now. Let's talk about, like, how do you actually build that relationship with your audience in your book? I mean, when you're working with clients to help them structure their book, where do you put your offers? What kind of offers do you make? How do you encourage readers to actually to get involved with the author after they've read the book?
Cool. So on that, also this nitty-gritty is slightly theoretical as well, because you have to know that outcome that you're decided. So maybe we'll put it in the context of nonfiction, health space. Someone who's, say, a doctor who's got one-on-one service practice and stuff, and they're trying to scale themselves. I think that's really important. And you always need to be testing what works, because I'll throw a quick disclaimer out. At one point, my only goal for the first part of the relationship was to try to get a review. So one, we honestly knew how they felt about it. We didn't tell them we wanted a good review or a bad review. We'd say, hey, I'll send you this. If you show me you can leave a review, we don't care if it's good or bad. I just want to know. And I had about 2,000, almost 3,000 reviews on one of my titles on Amazon. They were all positive, good reviews. And they made a change where you can't actually make that request in the way that we were doing. You can't incentivize someone to give a review at all. And so I actually lost all of those reviews. Amazon swiped them from us. So that was a nice, interesting lesson. And so that kind of was the rule. But I always knew was always stay above board with Amazon, because that's the biggest distribution channel that you're going to have. So always try to do that, which means quality content, making sure you're staying within the terms and conditions and stuff like that. Then the rule that also taught me is that this stuff's going to change. It's constantly going to change, and you really want to stay on top of it, especially as people's devices change and all that. But on the nitty-gritty tactical side of it, I guess, is essentially if I'm reading a book, I want to know what the next psychological step as a reader to add more value would be. So if I'm reading along and you're listing off supplements that you should be taking and recipes and cooking and things like that should be done, I'd want to know a way to drive that information home further. So I'd say, and by the way, I prepared the following bonuses for you. and they're sitting there like, I just got done talking about my supplement recommendations, and like, hey, I made a video actually showing you the different options and helping you decide. And so I really like videos because it engages that multimedia level. So if you have a podcast or you've got a video, that really helps reinforce whatever you're teaching. And then you set it up with a gate. Basically, put your email in and you get this and X, Y, and Z, to get them on there. Sometimes you might just be sending them directly to your blog or your site to reference something, which could be like an offer like, hey, I know we recommended this supplement 10 times. It's linked. The one we recommend the highest is linked on our blog. But generally my goal is to get them on a newsletter. And that is to reinforce whatever they signed up to read your book for, because we already know they're interested in it. If they've read to the point in your book where they've heard about it, they've liked engaging with you. And my goal is to get them on there, give them something of more value that builds more like and trust about the author, and then follow it up. And generally we'll write out like a 60-day follow-up email sequence. I follow Andre Chaperon's soap opera sequence that he taught in Autoresponder Madness, and we just kind of tweak that a little bit and kind of formulated our own version of it that we do there. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk tactical sometimes because it's so dependent on your end outcome goal. But if I'm someone who's got services and stuff, I'm trying to scale myself, I'd probably try to figure out how to create passive income streams that are aligned with my core expertise. And that's why health and diet and fitness are really easy, because there's so many other elements than whatever. If you're teaching a diet, there's a lot of other pieces that they need to be reinforced, like mindset. You might have a great meditation or video or something that helps people with their mindset of sticking with a diet. I've seen a great video that someone we work with did where they got a camera and they went through the grocery store and they're like, hey, remember we talked about all these things that you need to buy for the diet? This is how to actually shop in the grocery store and this is how to read the labels and how to do that. And I think it just really shows that you care to your reader, that you took the time to reinforce that you didn't just write your document and send it off. And so that's why I really like starting with multimedia and then following up with a soap opera sequence, which is, emails that tell more story, because that's the one thing that we've decided that we had in common is we are here about this topic, and we also enjoy story, because people who read books actually like to read generally. That's a good reason to read. And so we want the emails to be an extension of the book, an extension of that relationship as it goes along.
Totally. Yeah, you made another awesome point there I want to reinforce about, like shooting a video in the grocery store, like to show people how to shop. Like, it's so easy to do. Like, you could do that in an afternoon. And when you compare that to the time it takes to write and research a health and wellness book, 6 months or years to write the book, and you can record a video like that in one afternoon that adds just so much more value. And like you said, it shows the readers that you really care, like above and beyond just writing the book, that you're actually, coaching them like in video format and showing them like visually, because people learn different ways, and even a lot of people that read like me, we still learn in other ways, like visually and audio as well. So
and that's why I like, and you don't have to, it can be stuff you're already making. That's why I like the podcast stuff too, like you're doing here, because maybe you're writing a book about publishing, and you might reference the ability to build a continuous relationship, and then you'll reference this podcast, and you'll have it linked on a resource guide that they get to go talk to or go listen to. As I was mentioning Sam Harris, I was reading a bunch of his stuff this weekend, and he was talking, funny enough, about the use of psychedelics and psychotherapy, and that's not what that book was about that I was reading. There was an area, he goes, if you're interested in that, I just did an essay and a podcast about the subject. I was able to go off on a little tangent with him. So it was actually more like we were having a conversation, but he was keeping the container of the topic we were on. I really enjoyed that interaction. It made it much more real for me in that. And that's really rule number one, is realize there are readers here. I think internet marketers in particular are some of the worst at forgetting that they're real people. And the biggest thing I've noticed that's different about marketing with books versus other mediums is there's a lot of time involved and a lot of trust. When you purchase a book for $3 on Kindle and do it, the $3 is actually insignificant compared to the 5 hours that they're going to give you of their time to read the book, and your respect for that time, I think is probably the most important piece that they're going to recognize, when they go through it.
Hmm. Totally. That's a really great point there for sure. And that's one of the things that is kind of like a really important lesson for me is like when you look at like the analytics and the sales data and stuff online, you just see numbers, 1,000 sales or whatever.
Mhm.
But then when you get the email from someone saying, "Oh my God, your book changed my life," or they have a question or they have a problem they want you to help them with, then you realize like, oh, these are real people, and you want to do as much as you possibly can to help the real people,
Yeah, exactly.
not just a numbers game. I mean, numbers are important for business, but there's real people that whose lives you're changing and affecting.
Right, and that's where it's important to put the hat on that you need to put on. And what I've enjoyed about kind of the model that I took on this was not to be the. I like working with people who don't really like marketing. That seems something that they get like gross thinking. They can't even have the conversations that we could probably talk about all day. I like the analytics and the numbers and stuff, but it really only works when the person producing the content that's being delivered is. I like when they're stuck in a vacuum sealed container where they know they need marketing to have an income and have a business and survive. But some of my favorite people are the ones who are like, hey, I'm the best in the world at this, and I know I need marketing, but let me work with you on it, or where can I outsource this, or like get a partner or something so that you can just stay in that vacuum of quality deliverables and have just enough information. With technical stuff, I took the exact same approach mentally for myself. I knew from the start, I've never done anything more than an email technically. Like I don't know how to do, I can barely log in to send an email on AWeber. And I kind of put that blockage in the way for me so that I can stay focused on the relationship and the copy and the traffic and how all those things work together and not get bogged down in those details, and making sure that whenever I'm doing this, I've got that part covered in another way. It can bottleneck my speed at some time if I don't have that person, right away. But it also, keeps me focused on the message and the marketing and all of those things and the story fitting together. And so I do think it's nice to have the isolation of the pieces, and the containers that they are in. Um, Marketing is just another form of relationship building and communication, and that content's the same thing, but on a deeper level of value delivery. And then the tech stuff is how it all meshes together. So, it's all part of a big puzzle, and you want to decide which place you're going to put your 10,000 hours into, as opposed to trying to do them all. I think can be extremely distracting. Um, Now, the slight caveat, I guess, disclaimer to that is knowing just enough to know what's happening. Like if I am having someone build a website or write a book or do one of those things, I want to be involved in the process at least once enough to see what it is, so you have real expectations of what people are doing, so that when you're working with teams and other people, that you're not, an asshole. You actually understand what is going on, because, to me at the beginning, I remember tech stuff. I just thought it magically appeared out the internet, like, oh, he built a website, and then I made an attempt for 5 minutes. I was like, oh my gosh, this is hard. I am not going to do this. So yeah, I think there's a nice little balance of it. But it all comes back to that container of really high quality of whatever you do. If you spread yourself too thin, and you're the person who's the best person at marketing or of how to teach relationship advice or health advice or any of those things, and you start becoming an expert in marketing, you're taking time away that should be given to your customer base, delivering more valuable content, doing more research, going to more events, having more speaking gigs, and doing that. And generally people who are doing really good work in the world are going to attract other people who can help them with their marketing and stuff like that when they're doing good stuff. I know I just have a lady who I read her book and saw her speak, and I basically threw myself at her, like, I want to help you with marketing. I don't want you to start learning this stuff because you need to stay where you are. So it's amazing. And you kind of attract that stuff as you go along.
Yeah, it's a great point. You really have to focus on what your strengths are, and same thing for me. Like I don't know. I mean, I know how to set up a website, and I know how to send an email with AWeber, but I don't know coding or programming, or I can't build a big fancy website myself. Like I hire people to do that stuff. But on the other, some of the biggest mistakes I made in my business with online marketing, especially, was trying to hire people to do stuff that I didn't even understand how to do it yet. And I didn't ask someone to teach me, or I didn't ask someone, I didn't really do my research ahead of time. So like I remember I spent like $8,000 for someone to build my website, like one of my first websites, and I was like, and now looking back, I'm like, that's stupid. I wasted so much money. I could have got done so much cheaper. But the reason is like I didn't know, right? And like the website didn't function as well as I wanted it to because I just didn't know like how anything worked because I didn't do my research. And another big thing I've learned with contractors is like, ask questions. Like, if someone's really a good partner to work with, they'll teach you a little bit, and even for free, they'll talk to you for 20 minutes on the phone and teach you if you have some questions that need to be answered, so that you actually understand, so you're not going into something totally blind.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's a good balance there, I think, too, is hiring professionals is generally more expensive for your first cost, but generally less expensive in the long run, especially if you don't know. So I think there's that balance. Like if you have a very good knowledge of what needs to be done and you just don't have time to do it, you can go grab a cheap, outsourced person, but you just spend the time to bullet it out exactly as you would do it and give implicit, detailed instructions. But if it's something that you have almost zero scope of knowledge, but you have a bigger creative vision that you want to see, I think paying for professionals to do that is really, really important because that takes that curve away where you might just be racking up hours when you didn't communicate something correctly or, things like that kind of come up along the way. And I dealt a lot with that with working with ghostwriters and editors and stuff at the beginning of like really hiring the best to get it done once as opposed to, getting something back that was, usually you get what you pay for. The only caveat to that is when you know in depth enough how to give very detailed instructions to people of what they need and the coaching that they need, then you can kind of hire a cheaper outsourced type of labor for stuff. But it really comes back to how much you're putting in because you're kind of doing their job for them when you're laying it out that well. When you're hiring a pro, you can have one 20-minute phone call and an email here and there, and they're going to get what you want because they've done it and they get it. Where some of that's why they get paid, what they get paid, I think. So I think it's a good distinction that you're always kind of playing with.
Yeah, totally. That's a great point for sure. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about some fiction stuff because I know a lot of stuff we talked about totally makes sense like for nonfiction authors, and it's like it's obvious. If you're a nonfiction author, you maybe have other products and services and coaching programs and stuff that you're offering. But I find a lot of fiction authors they don't understand like what else am I trying to sell? I mean I just sell books. Like what else do I do? So how do you? And I know you've worked with some really awesome fiction clients, and some like and the last time we were talking, some guy had like a big movie deal that you were
Yeah.
working with. So what are some other income streams, potential income streams for fiction authors, and how do you go about building those relationships like we talked about before, specifically for fiction authors?
So I think the key difference, and this is something that I'm always playing with too. It's hard to like call myself an expert on any of these because I feel more like an experimenter of it, which you're always like trying and playing because it's never the same as it was before. But the frame of delivering quality, understanding what people want, and building a relationship is still there, and continuing that on once you have that engagement. The difference is I think there's a key relationship in nonfiction where people are engaging and learning, where with the fiction, it's more of a community that we're trying to build instead of a relationship. So we're building a community around the subject matter. Whether we could talk about the Western book because that's been a very interesting thing. Is probably the perfect example of how I've had to play with fiction, where it was very hard for me at first to be like, hey, well, I don't have products and services to sell on the back end of this. What I figured out worked really well was a serial, continuum of these books. And so it was really nice with the Western book. We actually got a book from Norway, translated it into English, and now 11 other languages as well. But there's 83 books in the series. So if it's a good book, that actually is one of the places when you have a lot of them that you can end up making a serious revenue stream if you've got good content and you're bringing people back and you're leaking it out. And right now I'm following kind of the House of Cards model, and I'm releasing like a chunk of them at a time so people can binge out, 5 at a time where they're coming in. But they're getting on an email list because we actually shot some videos and we have a documentary going about the movie that's being made, which is like a full big Hollywood production. So a movie's a cool back end. It's pretty over the top, but I can tell you it's a ton of work, and there's a reason it's still not out, and we were working on it a year ago when we talked, and it still will be another year. Those movies take a lot of time and money, but you take that same concept for anything, and you could have a podcast about that, talking about the subject matter. You can have games, you can have apps, you can have merchandise, but you have to be kind of committed to building that following and following business principles. You're kind of building your own little community or your little cult-like following, as they say, about that. So, if you have a crazy fiction author, you want to maybe have one of those characters that people relate with, and that person is out there engaging, with them. And we did a good job of that with a few things where we've actually set up Facebook, private communities that the readers get to engage in as part of the book. And then they get in there, and we might have, the readers interact for what's to come next. So it's really cool if the author posts in there, hey, working on the next volume of, this fiction series, looking to can't come up with a name for this character. Please submit. And the best person who comes up with the story, I'm going to name the character after you in the book. And now your community is like engaged with you. And both with fiction and nonfiction, another cool choice I've noticed is how big your scope is that you want to go. So some people, it's better served if they're in a specific, like kind of a smaller niche, to be like, I'm not going to go try to gather the whole world. I'd rather have 2,000 or 3,000 people who are my most passionate, crazy readers that I'm speaking to and working with than 50,000. And a lot of that comes with those decisions of facing the realities of how many readers are there for your subject matter and what you want to do with them. Because I know a guy who's even in nonfiction and has, I think, only like 2,500 people on his email list, because there's probably only 5,000 people who like this type of content out there. It's very like obscure niche, and he makes a very good living from them because he understands exactly what they want. And I think communicating with them and in fiction, focusing on building a community around what was started. You've seen that in the movie industry. The amount of other products and services and things that come out. There's whole amusement parks built around something that started as a book and then became a movie and then did this. So it's kind of up to your imagination of how far you're willing to go down that rabbit hole and start to play with this and really treat it. And honestly, if you just ask people, they'll know like half the employees that we're going to be using for this book to movie company came from asking the readers. Like, hey, who's an awesome designer who wants to be on this, and they were passionate about it and they wanted to be part of the community. So really you can build a really large community around that. And my partner Johnny, on the info product that we did about how to write and create and do the book, that it did really well, and we still have a lot of people going through it who are fiction writers. He's done really well in the paranormal vampire fiction stuff, and that's just an industry. He picked it, he went for it, and dominated it. Now I'm focusing on the Western anti-hero stories in this one place, and so really just kind of diving into building that back-end community. Mm-hmm. But I would say all of that is contingent on your book selling well. So I'm kind of having that discussion based on the fact that you've taken the necessary steps, and that's what we like teaching that info product is good covers, well-written story, engaging, keeping open loops to keep people moving along and excited, and basic writing principles, and applying that to how this all comes together.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. I mean, obviously if you've got a poorly written book that hasn't been edited and it's not formatted right, and then at the end you say, hey, if you love this book, sign up for the community, you're not going to get a big community, and you're not going to sell a lot of books because the product isn't there yet. So obviously, I mean, this is the kind of stuff you'd want to do after you have, a polished, totally awesome finished product that you're really proud of, that, you're so in love with and so confident about that you can go out and share with, everyone on social media and share with your email list and invest some serious money to market and promote it.
Yeah. You want to care about it. I have 1,000 paperback copies of the book sitting over here, and I hand it out to almost everyone who walks through. It's interesting. We just got finally the rights to sell the physical versions. We've only had the digital rights, for a while. And so now I'm excited to move on to that as well, because it's really interesting seeing, like, without having just staying with the digital piece is really cool and it works, and there's a lot of Kindle readers, but often it's really important to have both. Like, you need to have both versions of those, and you'll get sales of both of them too. So it's another income stream, and it's really easy to do. I'm actually going through doing audio versions of almost every one of my books right now. So I want the physical, I want the audio, I want to own that ecosystem. And once you have a piece of content that's doing well, you want to do all those things. And so this all comes back once again to deciding on the outcome you want, I guess. But once you have a proven piece, and if you're operating on a shoestring and really limited, just doing the Kindle thing and playing with covers, titles, messaging, and marketing campaigns, you can play with it until you're ready, and then start to add the other ones once it's perfected. But if you have put in the time and energy to do the prep work, where you've got a winner going out the gate, I would always launch with other pieces of the product that can be easily built. And if you're staying in Amazon, it's pretty easy to use CreateSpace and the stuff that exists there to do all that stuff. So.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, you mentioned something really awesome before, like about community and like how important that is, especially for fiction authors. And I've noticed that too. And you mentioned like a Facebook groups and how you invite people to a private Facebook group. And we've had a lot of success with that as well with my own books and some of our clients too. So tell us about that and like, how do you do that, and what is the benefit of having like a private community where people actually communicate with each other about your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all gotten so hung up on email lists because that's what was being taught in internet marketing. That's worked really well, and it's kind of been a mainstay. But it's fairly obvious that a lot of this is moving over to social media as well. And just the act of being in a private group, email list is a very one-way communication. You have a two-way. You basically have built an echo chamber of your readers that you can communicate with, you can engage with, you can use them to work this. And one of the first steps I'll usually do is try to identify a community manager. And I'll do that from within the book, or from within that group. And you'll be able to tell within a few weeks of having members who your superstars are. Who are in there posting constantly and really engaging, and obviously have some free time is nice. And so having someone who's not you, who's actual reader, helping manage the community, and there's most of the time you just give them free books, and they're in to do that, and you can pay them, you can do a lot of different stuff there. And just taking the time to care is something like creating a schedule of content that's going to be out, so it's out of your mind and it's getting done. That you're once a week leaking a piece of a new chapter or something, or you're once a week also going to bring in a piece of content relative to that community. And just by writing that down and putting it on a calendar with some reminders can go a long way than just kind of winging it and seeing how it goes as you build the community.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And also the community provides a lot of support, for you as the author, as the artist, right? Because like when you commit to doing something once a week, like if you have to write a chapter a week, you tell your community you're going to do it. Like you can't take the week off. You promised you were going to do it, and so it kind of like puts your foot to the fire and makes sure that you're actually making progress and constantly creating new stuff, new valuable stuff for your audience.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point to go back to. Also, accountability to your readers of producing good stuff. So some people are afraid to create online communities of their customers in case they are not producing good quality content, and they can get like an uprising against them. Not doing that, but you're basically committing to being transparent, communicating with them, allowing them to facilitate, your customers all communicating together. And I think it's a really good reality check piece that keeps you accountable to the people who are keeping you alive. You wouldn't have your business without your readers, and your readers wouldn't have content to read without you. So it creates kind of a perfect little blend. If you just put everyone together and facilitate that situation, I think shows, some pretty cool ways that you're willing to be out there and present. And the bigger you get, you will have lack. Like, you're not going to be able to please everyone. And this is something I've been really concentrating on, because I've been helping other people become famous for a long time, working on my own book, and I've recorded a lot of podcasts and stuff for something that's totally unrelated to all this stuff I've been doing, something I've been working on in my life. And I was just thinking about it, and I was listening to a podcast with Neil Strauss and Tim Ferriss talking about the writing process,
Yeah, I just
and
listened to that here.
like it was really interesting because it also tied into a principle that I learned. I've always known, but after I did an interview with Ryan Holiday, and it really solidified it for me of defining who it is you really care about, and then the people you will never be able to please because they're just not your customers and not your readers. Um, and so you write whatever you write, you build whatever you build for those people. But at the same time, you know there's some people who are not going to like what you have, no matter what, and they just exist in the world. And then with that writing process, I loved where he said his third stage of the writing process was editing it for the haters. So you like go ahead and say, I know you're not going to like this, and do the best job you can of raising their point in a way that you control first. If you go through this and you're that confident in what you've done, then you should never have a fear of anything. I think he mentioned one of the best people in the world at it is Eminem, because he says all this controversial stuff constantly, but he also has gone ahead and made himself in the backseat as the wrong guy. He's made the points that the haters are going to make anyway, and so I really like thinking about it in terms like that. It's pretty cool to think ahead that much.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point, and that's one of the things I've been going through recently as well. As I sold so many more books, and I get so many emails from people, and not all of them are happy. Some of the people, they don't like the way I said something in the book, or they don't believe with me, or and it's like you can't make everyone happy, or you get a 1-star review for your book, and that's just life, and no matter what you're writing about, if someone doesn't disagree with you, then that means it's like strongly, then that means there's probably no one that really strongly agrees with you and strongly is passionate about what you're writing about. So it's like, in order to make some people really, really happy, you're gonna have to be able to make some people really, really upset, and that's just life. That's like kind of that balance that exists there.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. Like if you're not pissing some people off, you're definitely not making some people really happy as well and passionate. Um, because you have to have a stand. Being in the middle is a very, very bad place to be. A politician who doesn't pick a side will never win. And that content will never go. And another really interesting thing is anger is actually one of the most amazing marketing tools on the planet. There's no emotion that gets more clicks than the emotion of anger. So if you can use that to your advantage in some way, I actually just did a webinar that I helped consult on for the guys they really fixed some pretty serious chronic illnesses that they had, and they wanted to tell their story, and they were looking at a coaching program around that. But basically, it would never work for someone who didn't eat meat. So I was basically going to try to get the vegans and stuff up against us because it would create clicks and it would create buzz and it would get us more traffic because we never are going to have them as a customer anyway because the diet they've prescribed, you have to eat meat. So if we had that kind of upheaval, we would end up getting a lot of traffic. And so that's what you got to look at it. It's like you're not going to please everyone, but you really, really want to stay diehard, true to your core values that your passionate people, your community, and your relationship are there for you for. And you mentioned something that I get emails constantly from people who got a 1-star or bad review asking for help. Like, this thing's killing me, blah, 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 because those reviews do run your business on Amazon. And when you have a passionate community, normally they're going to go take care of it. They're going to scrub that thing down. We've got a forum with a few thousand people who are there just when you get a bad review to, one, validate that it should or shouldn't be there, and then second, if it shouldn't be there, go help by voting it down and getting rid of it. But in a way, it's a sign. You were able to tip something off. With that Western book we were talking about, we sent out hundreds of review copies and got a bunch of really good reviews. And then, like, this character, I mean, he smokes and he drinks and he has sex and he gambles, but his moral compass is on. But this one lady who, there was a shaved head lady who got on there and passionately just said that this was the worst character ever created, and he's a womanizer and he does all these things, and it made me proud. I was like, awesome, that's definitely not the target audience that we were looking to talk to in this. I went and researched, what her background was, and it was basically bashing all things that have to do with men having sex with women, and that's what this fiction character does a lot of. And we knew that we hit the chord on the right way because that was one out of about 200 reviews that was there, and just clearly identified, like, we're not going to put that in our ad campaigns where we're spending money on Facebook because there's no necessary need to. We've identified that. And so yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you just got to be comfortable with it, and it can be emotional for people because you'll get married to their work, and no one likes to hear that your baby's ugly. No one likes that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but I mean, like, from a marketing standpoint, like the worst thing that can happen is not that you get a bad review. It's that like you get like just this lukewarm response. Everyone's like, the book was okay, or it was boring, or it wasn't anything special. Like that's the worst response you can get because that means you're not going to sell a lot of copies, right? Like look at Hillary Clinton's new book. I think it was like New York Times bestseller and sold 40,000 copies in the first week, I think, and it's like an average 2-star reviews on Amazon. It's got tons and tons of 1-star reviews.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, there's reasons for that, and there's probably things that she could have done to make it better, so she wouldn't got so many negative reviews. But on the other hand, like that controversy sells. It's better to have that response than to just have no one care.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I don't think someone who wasn't Hillary Clinton and didn't have the model that they drive. This discussion keeps coming up constantly in circles that I'm in is of the New York Times is almost not like don't even try, like it's not worth it because it doesn't carry the same weight that it used to. On that because it's an old school system. It's kind of like a good old boys network, and people are buying bulk orders of their own books and selling massive amounts of copies. Someone who self-published a book that got a bunch of lukewarm reviews generally is not going to go skyrocketing anywhere because there's no emotional drivers, like whatsoever. But if you pre-sell 20,000 copies to your best friends, in a campaign that's been worked at, there's been systems in place for this for a very long time, and they're starting to get exposed and tested now that anyone can basically write a good book and put it up and compete. They do it in a very, very different way. And once again, that's an outcome. If you want to be able to tell your parents you're a New York Times bestseller, then you probably want to go get a traditional publisher, or at least work with something like Result Source or something like that. And you're going to have to outlay some money and do a bunch of things. But if that doesn't really help your business any or your goals, then don't make that a priority. Don't spend the money. Don't take the time and go through the rigmarole of kind of this old school system if it's not actually serving what you're out to do right now. So
yeah, that's like pure gold right there, honestly. And I really want people to get that point. It's like just because something is an important goal for some authors doesn't mean it has to be an important goal for you. Like just because some people like really want New York Times bestseller, like that's like their whole goal is they really want that, doesn't mean it's right for you or your business. And you might never even need to have that accolade at all in your entire life and still be completely fulfilled and incredibly successful as an author, right? Because it's, like you said, it's kind of an outdated mechanism of how they record it and everything, and like stuff like that. So it's like, when you're looking at what goals you want to achieve in your business, make sure they're actually goals that you want. Not just some advisor said, oh, you have to do this. Like, make sure it actually fits with what you really want to do, what you really want to create and achieve, and your vision.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's pretty funny. Just like as long as you're true to what you want and who your customers are. That was a pretty heady statement, but it's like once you do that, once you really define it and stick to it, it makes decisions a lot easier because what there are a lot of we've come up with a lot of decisions already on this call. Do I do this or do I do that? But once you're very clear on the outcome and the audience, I think it makes life a hell of a lot easier. I was going back to the Ryan Holiday thing, talking about the New York Times, because I know his first book basically exposed how he manipulated mass media like the New York Times. And there's a reason I think it should have been on the New York Times bestseller list, but somehow didn't get on there because he might have, pressed a few buttons there with the source of the content, being around that with this most recent book, which I thought was phenomenal. So yeah, I think it's all about the decisions that you want, and really define those. And you have two decisions to make: is who is your audience, and what do you want for yourself by putting in the energy to put out a book, because it's no small feat. I don't know anyone who's had really big success with a book where they really feel good about it, something they want to share with their friends and their family and talk about, who didn't have to put in some serious time. Like, I think on that same podcast I think we both listened to, the Neil Strauss, Tim Ferriss one, they're talking about like If you're not willing to put in a year on it, then you're probably not, in the right position if you're going for a huge book launch. Now, I can see doing less if you're doing little mini books to help on certain topics for a very niche subject. That's where I kind of disagreed with what they said, but for what they're talking about, doing a book that 200 plus pages, lots of research, you probably end up writing 1,000 pages and chop it all down, and you've got to commit to that. I think that Tim said one of the biggest things he hates is when he gets emails asking for mentorship around a book, and they want to do it part time and have it done in 3 months. He's like, that's a pretty good red flag that you're not sitting in the right position to do it. And you have all those decisions you can make. So I do know people who work with outsourcers and get quick little books done for that. But right there is a very key decision. Are you doing like your legacy book product that you're married to and you really care about and you want it to reach lots of people? Or do you have a message that you want to tell with the vehicle being the book, and then you've got more you want to work with it? Like, some people don't need all the notoriety. They literally just want to have, for people who are looking for that specific subject matter. They have it, and they've got it back in, they've got it all together, and that's what's so cool. The book's just a catalyst for where you want to go. You just have to know where you're going. It's not one of those, not all who wanders are lost. If you don't know where you're going in the book world, you're lost.
Yeah, that's a great point. Totally, man. Awesome. Well, Hollis, you shared some awesome wisdom with us today. I really appreciate it, man. So before we go, share with us where people can find out more info about you and the work that you're doing.
Cool, yeah. I am happy to connect with anyone. I have a contact form on my website, just holliscarter.com, and that'll shoot some stuff in there. I'm on like Facebook and Instagram, and always having a good time hanging out in there. And currently, we have our info product, the Perfect Publishing System, that I worked on with Johnny, that basically teaches kind of the creation process and the marketing stuff, kind of the pre to what we talked about here, on all of that. And yeah, usually we kind of putting some updates there. And I haven't actually been blogging or doing any of that stuff very much, but that's all about to change here. I'm kind of going to go, much like we were talking about, have a little of my own medicine. And I've been working with writers on the marketing side. Now I really want to see what that feels like now that I've got some subject matter that I feel content about. So I'll be updating that and putting out more stuff here as we go along.
Awesome. Thanks again, Hollis. Appreciate it.
All right, yeah, no problem.